The Kansas sun beat down mercilessly that afternoon, but it wasn't the heat that made Sergio Morales smile. It was the scene before him. A woman in her late 20s, worn-out denim coveralls patched at the knees, a battered yellow toolbox in her hands, standing next to the International Harvester like she could actually make a difference. Sergio pointed at her with both hands, laughing loud enough for everyone to hear. "That tractor's done for," he declared, voice loaded with absolute certainty. "I already checked everything. Blown engine, seized transmission. No point wasting time." Behind him, 3 figures watched in silence. Carmen Lopez, the ranch owner's wife, floral dress despite the tension. Michael, the eldest son, dark suit already covered in dust. Emily, the younger daughter, eyes fixed on the woman in the faded coveralls. Sarah Stone didn't look away. Copper-red hair pulled back in a low bun, some loose strands framing her face. She gripped the yellow toolbox firmly, the same one her father had used. She didn't respond, just set the toolbox on the ground, opened it with a precise gesture, and grabbed the first tool. Sergio crossed his arms, smile now wider. "Look, lady, I've worked on this ranch for 19 years. I know every bolt on that tractor. If I say it's dead, it's dead." She crouched next to the open hood. The red tractor seemed even bigger up close. Giant tires, massive frame, metal hot under the sun. Sarah ran her hand along the side of the engine, firm fingers searching for something. "4 days, Carmen murmured, voice tense. "We've got 4 days to start the harvest if that tractor doesn't run." She didn't need to finish, everyone knew. $100,000 in losses, maybe bankruptcy. Sergio let out a short laugh. "Better call the dealer. A new tractor's the only way out. I already made the contacts." Sarah didn't look at him, just kept inspecting. She turned to the lower part of the engine. Something caught her attention, fresh marks on a component. She ran her finger over it, oil still wet. She frowned. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss any of our incredible stories here at Underrated Mechanics. Also, drop a like and comment below telling us where you're watching from. "How long ago did this tractor stop?" she asked, voice calm. 4 days, Carmen answered. Sarah looked at the marks again. Recent tool work, too recent for a tractor that had been sitting for 4 days. Sergio shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "No point wasting time, lady. Blown engine doesn't fix itself with good intentions." She stood up, grabbed another tool from the toolbox, adjusted something, tested it. 15 minutes. Her breathing was controlled, movements precise. She turned the ignition key. The engine coughed, choked, died. Sergio burst out laughing. "See? Told you!" Carmen sighed, shoulders dropping. Michael shook his head. Emily kept watching hopefully. Sarah wiped her hands on a rag, went back to the engine, adjusted another part. 20 more minutes. The silence was thick, just the dry wind of the plains, the creak of metal, the sound of tool against engine. She turned the key again. The International Harvester roared to life. The engine fired up strong, powerful, like it had never had a problem at all. Carmen's eyes widened. Michael stepped forward. Emily smiled. Sergio went pale. Sarah let the engine run. She turned to him, eyes steady. "This tractor didn't have a blown engine," she said, voice low but clear. "It was sabotaged." And in that moment, everyone understood that something much bigger was about to be revealed. Sarah was 8 years old when she first entered her father's workshop. James Stone worked as a mechanic at a nearby ranch, specialized in International Harvester tractors. The little girl would sit on a wooden bench, legs swinging, watching his every move. "Machines talk, sweetheart," James would say, hands stained with grease as he adjusted a fuel injector. "You just gotta know how to listen." She watched, fascinated, as her father leaned his head close to the engine, like he was having a private conversation. how his fingers touched each piece carefully, searching for vibrations, temperatures, signals invisible to others. "What's this engine saying, Dad?" James smiled. "Says the high-pressure line is losing force. See?" He pointed to a connection. "When the diesel doesn't arrive with enough pressure, the engine complains. Listen." Sarah closed her eyes, concentrating. At first just noise, but then a pattern, an irregular rhythm, a false note in the middle of the mechanical symphony. "I hear it," she exclaimed, eyes shining. "That's my girl." James ruffled her hair. "You've got an ear for this." The years passed. Sarah kept coming every afternoon. At 14, she started as an apprentice. By 18, she'd mastered diesel injection systems better than many mechanics with decades of experience. The day James died, highway accident, unexpected, devastating, he left only one thing for his daughter, a yellow toolbox, the same one he'd used for 30 years. Inside, a handwritten note. "Sarah, these tools fixed over 1,000 engines. Now they're yours. Make them talk. Love, Dad." She held the toolbox against her chest, silent tears falling. It wasn't just metal and wrenches. It was every afternoon in the workshop, every lesson, every engine that sang again under her father's hands. But life after her father's death was harsh. Without family, without savings, Sarah drifted from town to town, sleeping in her old pickup when she could afford gas, in shelters when she couldn't, under bridges when there was no other choice. She took odd mechanic jobs where she could find them, but most shop owners took one look at her, a homeless woman with a toolbox, and turned her away. "We need someone reliable," they'd say, never giving her a chance to prove herself. The toolbox became her only constant companion, her only connection to better days. And now, standing in front of the International Harvester in Kansas, she felt her father's presence as if he were right beside her. Steady hands, calm voice, knowledge passed down with infinite patience. "Machines talk, sweetheart. You just got to know how to listen." She listened, and the tractor told her exactly what had gone wrong. 4 days earlier, the International Harvester had roared for the last time. Robert Lopez, 52-year-old rancher, face weathered by the sun, was preparing the field for harvest when the engine coughed, failed, and died. He tried starting it 3 times. Nothing. Absolute silence. He climbed down from the tractor, frustration evident. The harvest was about to begin. Wheat ready, ripe for cutting. Every day of delay meant losses. Weather didn't wait. Debts didn't either. Sergio arrived 20 minutes later, opened the hood, inspected with broad gestures, dramatic movements. Touched here, tested there, shook his head repeatedly. "Blown engine," he declared, wiping his hands on a rag. "Fuel injector collapsed. Transmission seized. Nothing to be done, Robert." Robert frowned. "You sure? This tractor's only 6 years old. I always did the maintenance." "That's exactly why." Sergio shrugged. "It served its time. Diesel engines have limits. This one reached its limit." Carmen, who'd been listening from the house, walked over. "Can't it be repaired?" Sergio shook his head emphatically. "Mrs. Lopez, I've been working here 19 years. I know these tractors better than anyone. Believe me, I've seen blown engines before. This one's got no salvation." Robert sighed deeply. "How much would a new one cost?" "A new International Harvester." Sergio did mental calculations. "Around $150,000. I know a reliable dealer. I can make the contacts today." Robert felt the weight of that number. The harvest would bring in $100,000, maybe $120,000 if the weather cooperated. He'd have to take out a loan, mortgage the land, take a risk. "Give me a day to think about it," Robert asked. "Sure, but remember, harvest doesn't wait. Every day without a tractor is money lost." Sergio walked away satisfied. He knew Robert had no options. He knew panic would pressure him. He knew the $15,000 dealer commission was already his. What Sergio didn't know was that Carmen didn't trust absolute diagnoses, and that the next day, Robert would suffer an accident that would leave him bedridden, leaving her in charge of decisions that would change everything. The day after Sergio's diagnosis, Robert Lopez had an accident. Nothing dramatic, just a foot misplaced on a rusty ladder, an awkward fall, fractured ribs, but enough to leave him in bed, immobile, breathing painful, unable to manage the ranch. Carmen Lopez, 43 years old, floral dresses, soft voice but will of steel, became the sole authority. And Carmen had doubts. 19 years of trusting Sergio. 19 years without problems, but something about his diagnosis didn't add up. Blown engine after only 6 years, no prior warning signs, no gradual failures. Sergio had explicitly forbidden other mechanics from touching the tractor. "It's a safety protocol," he'd explained. "A blown engine can have dangerous leaks. Better that nobody handles it until we decide what to do." Eduardo Ramirez, the assistant mechanic, had nodded obediently. Michael and Emily kept their distance. Everyone respected the order. Everyone except Carmen. On the morning of the third day, she drove to town, 15 miles of dusty road. She'd heard about a young mechanic who specialized in international harvesters, who'd solved problems others declared impossible. She found Sarah in a small workshop, coveralls stained with grease, adjusting the fuel injector on an old tractor. "Sarah Stone?" The young woman looked up, wiping her hands. "Yes, ma'am. How can I help you?" Carmen explained the situation. The dead tractor, Sergio's diagnosis, the harvest at risk, the urgency. Sarah listened carefully, asking technical questions. How old was the tractor? Maintenance history? Exact symptoms before it stopped? Did Sergio allow others to examine it? When Carmen mentioned the prohibition, something changed in Sarah's eyes. "Interesting," she murmured. "An experienced mechanic doesn't forbid a second opinion unless—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Carmen understood. "Can you come today? I'll pay you double your normal rate." Sarah closed the yellow toolbox. "You don't need to pay me double, Mrs. Lopez. If there's an international harvester in trouble, I'll come. Just give me the address." 2 hours later, Sarah arrived at the ranch. Sergio didn't yet know that his fatal diagnosis was about to be challenged by someone who listened to what machines really said. Sergio Morales was reviewing papers in the ranch's small workshop when he heard a car stop outside. He looked through the window. A young woman got out, faded coveralls, yellow toolbox in hand, walking directly toward the red tractor parked by the barn. He frowned. Who was she? What was she doing here? He went out quickly, closing the workshop door harder than necessary. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice controlled but tense. Sarah turned, looked at the man in front of her. Mid-40s, plaid shirt, advanced balding, expression mixing surprise and discomfort. "I'm Sarah Stone. Mrs. Lopez hired me to check the tractor." Sergio blinked. "Carmen hired you." "That's right." Sergio's face tensed. He tried to maintain a professional tone. "Look, miss, I already did the complete diagnosis. Blown engine, collapsed fuel injector. Nothing more to check. I wouldn't want you to waste your time." Sarah set the toolbox on the ground, looked at him directly. "It's not a waste of time. If Mrs. Lopez hired me, is there a problem with me examining the tractor?" Sergio shifted his weight, crossed his arms. "The problem is, I already invested hours in that diagnosis. I know exactly what's wrong. If someone starts taking it apart without proper knowledge, they could make things worse." "I understand your concern," Sarah kept her calm, "but I've worked with international harvesters for years. I know what I'm doing." At that moment, Carmen came out of the house, walking toward them with determined steps. "Sergio, this is Sarah Stone, diesel tractor specialist. I asked her to come." Sergio turned to Carmen, surprise evident. "Mrs. Lopez, with all due respect, I already gave you the diagnosis. This tractor—" "I know, Sergio," Carmen interrupted gently but firmly, "and I appreciate your work, but $150,000 is a lot of money. I want to be sure before making that decision." Sergio clenched his jaw. He couldn't argue with the ranch owner, couldn't explicitly forbid her from seeking a second opinion, but panic started climbing up his spine. If this young woman discovered something— "Fine," he said finally, forcing a smile. "Go ahead. But when you see I'm right, I expect you to acknowledge it." Sarah didn't respond, just picked up the yellow toolbox, walked to the tractor, and started working. And Sergio knew in that precise instant that he'd made a mistake underestimating her. If you're finding this story as fascinating as we are, don't forget to subscribe to Underrated Mechanics and hit that like button. Your support means the world to us. And comment below with your location. We love hearing from viewers around the globe. Sarah Stone opened the yellow toolbox with a deliberate gesture. The tools gleamed under the Kansas sun. Wrenches of various sizes, screwdrivers, pressure gauges, clean rags folded with precision. Each piece in its exact place, just as her father had organized them for 30 years. Sergio watched from 15 feet away, arms crossed, forced smile. Carmen, Michael, and Emily formed a silent semicircle. Eduardo Ramirez, the assistant mechanic, had also approached, curious. Sarah circled the International Harvester slowly. She didn't touch anything at first, just observed, the way her father had taught her. "Machines tell their story," she murmured to herself. "You just have to read the signs." She ran her hand over the hood, accumulated dust, but not uniform. There were marks where someone had rested tools recently. She crouched, examined the lower part of the engine. First sign, the high-pressure line connection. The bolts showed fresh wrench marks, bright edges where metal had been scraped recently. This wasn't the natural wear of 6 years of use. This was recent manipulation. She ran her finger over the connection. Wet diesel oil, fresh, too fresh for a tractor that had been sitting for 4 days. "Finding anything?" Carmen asked, voice hopeful. Sarah didn't answer yet. She kept inspecting. Second sign, the bleed valve on the diesel system. Normally that valve should be closed, covered with accumulated dust and grease, but this one was clean. Someone had turned it recently. And not just that. It had been left partially open, enough to allow air into the fuel system. Any experienced mechanic knew that air in the diesel system meant a dead engine. And any honest mechanic knew that valve didn't open itself. Third sign, the oil bath air filter. Sarah opened it carefully. Inside, she found something that shouldn't be there. A clean rag, folded, strategically placed to partially block airflow. A diesel engine needs clean air to function. Blocking the filter was like covering someone's mouth. Slow, cruel, effective. Sarah closed the filter, stood up, looked directly at Sergio. "This tractor doesn't have a blown engine." Sergio laughed nervously. "Oh no. And what does it have according to you?" Sarah held his gaze. 3 very specific things. High-pressure connection loosened intentionally. Bleed valve open to introduce air into the system. Air filter blocked with a clean rag. Silence fell like a stone. "Are you saying that someone—" Carmen didn't finish the sentence. "I'm saying this tractor was sabotaged," Sarah pointed to each spot, "and less than 4 days ago." Sergio went pale. Eduardo stepped back, eyes wide. Michael and Emily looked at each other, and Carmen understood that her instinct had been right from the beginning. Carmen approached the tractor, face tense. "Show me. I want to see exactly what you found." Sarah nodded. She pointed to the first evidence. "Here." She touched the high-pressure connection between the fuel injector and the fuel injectors. This connection carries diesel at extremely high pressure. When it's properly tightened, the seal is perfect. No leaks, no dripping. She ran her finger over the metal, showing it to Carmen. Fresh oil glistened on her fingertip. "But look at this. Oil just leaked out, and these marks here," she pointed to the bolts, "are from a wrench, recent. If this tractor had been sitting for 4 days without anyone touching it, this oil would be dry, the marks would be dirty, oxidized." Carmen touched the metal carefully, felt the moisture. "And that makes the engine not work?" "Exactly. Without proper pressure, the diesel doesn't reach the cylinders. Engine won't start, looks blown, but it's not, just disconnected." Michael also approached, examining. "And the second thing?" Sarah moved to the bleed valve, a small screw located on the side of the fuel system. "This is called a bleed valve. Its function is to purge air from the system during maintenance. Normally it should be closed, always closed." She turned it slightly. "But see, it's partially open." "What happens if it's open?" Emily asked. "Air enters the diesel system, and diesel engines don't run with air in the fuel lines. They choke, cough, die, same as if they had a blown engine." Sergio, who had remained quiet, cleared his throat. "That could have loosened on its own. Engine vibration. Normal use." Sarah looked at him steadily. "Bleed valves don't loosen themselves. They're designed to resist extreme vibrations. And look here," she pointed. "Recent tool marks. Someone opened it manually." Carmen breathed deeply. "And the third evidence?" Sarah opened the air filter, pulled out the rag, held it for everyone to see. "This should never be here. An oil bath air filter works by trapping dust in special oil. But if you block the flow," she showed how the rag had been placed, "the engine doesn't get enough air, can't breathe, chokes." She extended the rag. "And notice something important. This rag is clean, new. If it had been here during 4 days of prior operation, it would be black with dust, soaked in oil. But it's almost clean. It was placed after the tractor stopped." Eduardo, who had been listening to everything, spoke for the first time. "My God." Carmen turned to Sergio. "Do you have anything to say, Sergio?" He swallowed, opened his mouth, closed it. Finally, I just made the diagnosis I considered correct." 3 simultaneous manipulations," Sarah interrupted, voice calm but firm. "Connection loosened, valve opened, filter blocked. That's not mechanical failure. That's intentional professional sabotage." The weight of those words fell on everyone. Carmen looked at Sergio with eyes that demanded answers. But first she wanted to see if Sarah could really fix what someone had broken so maliciously. Sarah rolled up her coverall sleeves, grabbed the wrench from the yellow toolbox, the same one her father had used 1,000 times, and knelt beside the engine. "I'm going to try to repair it now," she announced. "If it really is just sabotage, I should be able to reverse it." Sergio let out a dry laugh. "Go ahead, but when you see it doesn't work, I expect you to accept my original diagnosis." Sarah didn't respond. She began working. First step, reconnect the high-pressure line. She tightened the bolts with millimetric precision, each turn calculated until she felt the exact point where the seal was perfect, neither too loose nor too tight. She cleaned the excess oil with a rag. Second step, close the bleed valve. She turned the small screw until it sealed completely. She checked twice. No air leaks, system closed. Third step, clean the air filter. She removed the blocking rag. She checked the filter's oil. It was still at the proper level. She closed the cover. Airflow restored. 15 minutes. Steady hands, controlled breathing. Carmen watched hopefully. Michael and Emily held their breath. Eduardo watched fascinated. Sergio kept his arms crossed, confident smile. Sarah wiped her hands, walked to the driver's seat, climbed up, hand on the ignition key. "Moment of truth," she murmured. She turned the key. The engine turned once, twice, coughed, tried to start, spit out black smoke, choked and stopped. Silence. Sergio burst out laughing. "See?" he shouted, almost triumphant. "Told you! Blown engine, no fixing it. Now you're going to believe me, right?" Carmen felt her heart sink. Michael shook his head in frustration. Emily looked down. Eduardo murmured something inaudible, but Sarah didn't move, didn't get off the tractor, didn't show defeat. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, listening. The engine had coughed, hadn't fully roared, had tried to start, but something was still stopping it. Machines talk, sweetheart. You just got to know how to listen. She heard her father's voice and understood. The diesel system had been full of air for 4 days. Purging air from a high-pressure system doesn't happen in 15 minutes. It requires patience, repetition, time. Sarah got off the tractor, went back to the engine, grabbed another tool from the toolbox. Sergio looked at her, confusion mixed with nervousness. "What are you doing? You already tried. It doesn't work." Sarah met his eyes. "This is just the beginning." And Sergio, for the first time, felt real fear that this young woman really knew more than he'd anticipated. "We're just getting to the good part. Make sure you're subscribed to Underrated Mechanics so you don't miss what happens next. And if you're enjoying Sarah's journey, smash that like button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from." Sergio took a step toward the tractor, gesturing with both hands. "Enough already!" he exclaimed, voice rising. "This is a waste of time. I told Mrs. Lopez from the beginning that this engine was blown. You didn't have to bring in someone from outside, someone who clearly doesn't—" "Sergio!" Carmen's voice cut through the air like a knife. He stopped dead, turned to her. Carmen Lopez wasn't a woman of shouting. She didn't need to raise her voice to impose authority. After 23 years married to Robert, managing house, finances, employees, she'd learned that true power lies in calmness. "Yes, Mrs. Lopez." She walked toward him with measured steps, floral dress moving slightly in the dry Kansas breeze. She stopped half a meter away. "In 19 years working here, I've always trusted your judgment." Sergio nodded, recovering confidence. "And I've always been honest with—" "I'm not finished." Carmen interrupted him gently but firmly. "I trusted you. Robert trusted you. We never questioned your diagnoses, but today, for the first time, you gave me a diagnosis I couldn't verify. And when I asked for a second opinion, you got upset." "I didn't get upset, Mrs. Lopez. I just—" "Let me finish, Sergio." He closed his mouth. Carmen continued. "Sarah found 3 physical pieces of evidence of manipulation. 3, not 1, not 2. 3 parts that someone touched recently. And you said nobody should touch this tractor, that it was dangerous, that it could make the situation worse." Sergio opened his mouth to defend himself. Carmen raised a hand. "Now this young woman is working. She tried once. It didn't work completely, but she didn't give up. She's trying again, and you," she pointed at him, "are standing here laughing, celebrating that it doesn't work." Michael and Emily watched in silence. Eduardo had backed up several steps. "I wasn't celebrating. I was just—" "Yes, you were." Emily spoke for the first time, voice soft but clear. "You laughed when the engine didn't start." Sergio looked at the 17-year-old, surprised. Carmen nodded. "My daughter's right. And now I'm going to tell you something, Sergio. Let her work. No comments, no mockery, no interference. If it works, perfect. If it doesn't work, then we'll talk about a new tractor. But until that moment," she made a deliberate pause. Silence. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. Sergio swallowed, nodded stiffly. "As you say, Mrs. Lopez." He walked away several meters, but didn't leave. He needed to see what would happen. Needed to know if his lies were going to be exposed or if luck was still on his side. Sarah, who had heard everything while working, looked up briefly, met Carmen's eyes. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. Carmen just nodded. And Sarah returned to immerse herself in the engine, knowing that now she had something more powerful than tools. She had an ally. Sarah returned to the bleed valve with renewed purpose. This was what her father had taught her about diesel engines: patience, repetition, listening. She placed a small container under the valve, loosened the screw partially. Diesel began to flow out, but not just diesel, bubbles. Air trapped mixed with fuel, exactly what she expected. She manually pumped the system, pressing, releasing, pressing again. The diesel flowed with bubbles, small at first, then larger. Evidence of how much air had been intentionally introduced. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. The diesel now flowed clean, without bubbles, constant and uniform flow. She closed the valve, cleaned the excess, checked the pressure at the injectors, touched each connection, felt the temperature of the metal. 20 complete minutes. 35 minutes total since she'd started. She stood up, breathed deeply, walked to the driver's seat. Her hands, stained with diesel and grease, trembled slightly. Not from fear, from pure adrenaline. Carmen, Michael, Emily and Eduardo watched in absolute silence. Sergio, several meters back, jaw tense. Sarah climbed onto the tractor, sat down, hand on the ignition key. She closed her eyes for a second. "Dad, if you're there, help me." She turned the key. The engine turned once, twice, 3 times. And then the International Harvester roared. Not coughed, not choked, roared with full power, clean, perfect, like it had never had a single problem. The sound filled the Kansas air, deep, powerful, glorious. Carmen brought her hands to her mouth, instant tears. Michael shouted with joy. "Yes, it works!" Emily clapped, laughing. Eduardo whistled admiringly. "Incredible, simply incredible." The engine kept roaring, stable, no failures, no coughs, nothing suggesting any problem. Sarah let it run for 30 full seconds, listening to every note of that perfect mechanical symphony. Then she turned off the engine, got off the tractor. Her legs trembled slightly. Adrenaline, relief, triumph mixed in equal proportions. Carmen ran to her, hugged her tight. "You did it!" "My God, you did it!" Michael shook her hand vigorously. "You're amazing!" Emily smiled, shy but genuine. Eduardo approached. "Miss Stone, that was... I've never seen anything like it." Sarah breathed deeply. She looked toward where Sergio stood. He remained motionless, face pale, arms hanging at his sides. All the arrogance, all the confidence, all the certainty had disappeared, because now everyone knew the truth. That tractor never had a blown engine. That tractor was sabotaged, and the only person with access, knowledge, and motive was him. Sarah walked toward Sergio slowly, stopped in front of him, held his gaze. "This tractor didn't have a blown engine," she repeated, voice calm but clear for everyone to hear. "It was intentionally sabotaged by someone who knew exactly what to do to make it seem unrepairable." Carmen also approached. Michael, Emily, Eduardo, all surrounded Sergio. The circle was closing, and Sergio understood there was no escape now. Carmen looked at Sergio steadily. "I want Sarah to explain exactly what she found, with details. And I want everyone to listen." Sarah nodded, wiped her hands with a rag, walked to the group, pointed at the International Harvester's engine. "I'm going to explain the 3 sabotage points I found. These aren't mechanical failures, they're intentional manipulations." Eduardo moved closer, fascinated. Michael and Emily paid absolute attention. Sergio remained motionless, jaw locked. "First point." Sarah pointed to the high-pressure connection. "This line carries diesel from the fuel injector to the fuel injectors. When properly tightened, the seal is hermetic. Pressure can reach 500 psi. If there's a leak, however minimal, the system doesn't work." She touched the bolts. "Someone loosened these connections deliberately. The tool marks are recent, and the fresh diesel oil confirms it was manipulated less than 4 days ago. A tractor sitting for 4 days untouched should have dry, oxidized oil, not wet and shiny." Carmen nodded, understanding. "Second point." Sarah moved to the bleed valve. "This small screw has a very specific function. It's only used during maintenance to purge air from the fuel system. It should always be closed, always. She turned the valve slightly. But someone opened it partially. When it's open, air enters the diesel system, and diesel engines can't run with air in the fuel lines. It's like trying to drink water through a straw with a hole in it. Doesn't flow correctly. Michael frowned. And that couldn't have loosened itself from tractor vibration? No, Sarah was emphatic. These valves are designed to resist extreme vibrations, thousands of hours of work. And look here, she pointed to the marks. Recently used tool. Someone turned it manually. Emily spoke, voice soft but clear. How long does it take to purge the air from a system like this? With manual pumping, between 15 and 20 minutes. That's why my first attempt failed. There was too much accumulated air. I needed to purge it completely. That's what I did on the second attempt, Eduardo murmured admiringly. That's why we saw the bubbles coming out when you pumped. Exactly. Small bubbles at first, then bigger ones, until the diesel came out clean, without air. Only then could the engine function correctly. Sarah pointed to the air filter. Third point, this is the most obvious. Someone placed a clean rag inside the air filter, partially blocking the flow. A diesel engine needs clean air to function. Without enough air, it chokes, just like a person would. She extended the rag for everyone to see. And notice, clean rag, almost new. If it had been here during normal tractor operation, it would be black with dust, soaked in filter oil. But it's relatively clean. It was placed after the tractor shut down, not before. Absolute silence. Carmen turned to Sergio. 3 manipulations. 3. Not 1 failure, not 2. 3 deliberate acts by someone with technical knowledge, someone with access, someone who knew exactly what to do to make the tractor seem like it had a blown engine when it really didn't. Sergio opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed hard. And he knew the truth was about to come out, with or without his cooperation. Eduardo Ramirez stepped forward. 26 years old, strands of black hair falling over his forehead, trembling hands, irregular breathing. I know something. Everyone turned to him. Sergio looked at him with silent warning in his eyes, but Eduardo avoided his gaze. Eduardo, don't, Sergio began. Be quiet. Carmen interrupted with a sharp voice. Eduardo, speak. The young mechanic wiped his hands on his coveralls nervously. 3 weeks ago, I overheard a conversation between Sergio and a man from town. He wasn't a ranch client. He was a tractor dealer from the dealership in town. Michael tensed. What kind of conversation? Eduardo breathed deeply. They were talking about commission. The dealer told Sergio that if he could convince Mr. Robert to buy a new tractor, he'd get $15,000, 10% of the tractor's price. Carmen went pale. $15,000? Yes, ma'am, I heard it clearly. The dealer said old tractors always have problems, that he just needed to wait for the right moment, and when that moment came, diagnose an irreparable failure. Emily brought her hand to her mouth. Oh, my God! Eduardo continued, voice gaining firmness now that he'd started. 3 days after that conversation, the tractor broke down, and Sergio said it was a blown engine, that there was no possible repair, that they needed to buy a new one, urgent, before harvest came. Michael took a threatening step toward Sergio. You son of a... Michael! Carmen stopped him with one hand. Let him finish. Eduardo looked at Sergio directly for the first time. I didn't say anything because Sergio threatened me. Said if I talked, he'd say I was incompetent, that he'd get me fired. I need this job. My mom's sick. My sister's in school. His voice broke. Carmen walked to Eduardo, put a hand on his shoulder. You did the right thing now. That's what matters. She turned to Sergio. Is it true? Sergio tried to maintain composure. Eduardo's lying. He's jealous because I'm head mechanic and he's just... The dealer's name, Carmen interrupted. Eduardo responded immediately. Tom Jensen, Central Tractor Agency on Main Street in town. Carmen nodded slowly. I'm going to call that agency first thing tomorrow morning, and I'm going to ask if they have a salesman named Tom Jensen, and if that man knows Sergio Morales. Sergio went completely pale. Carmen, I mean, Mrs. Lopez. Mrs. Lopez, she corrected coldly, and I'm not interested in hearing explanations yet. First I'm going to verify Eduardo's story, then we'll talk. You, me, and Robert. She looked at Sarah. Meanwhile, this young woman just proved our tractor works perfectly, and that someone deliberately lied to steal $150,000 from us, Michael intervened, and put the entire harvest at risk. If we'd lost time waiting for a new tractor, we would have lost the whole harvest, Carmen completed. $100,000 in losses, maybe more. She turned to Sergio one last time. Get out of my sight now! Go home, tomorrow we'll talk! Sergio opened his mouth. He saw everyone's faces. Carmen, Michael, Emily, Eduardo, Sarah. No compassion, no doubt. He turned and walked to his car, hands shaking, legs barely holding him. The circle had closed completely. The next day, Carmen Lopez did exactly what she'd promised. She called Central Tractor Agency, asked for Tom Jensen. The manager confirmed he worked there. Senior salesman, 3 years with the company. Carmen asked to speak with him. When Tom Jensen answered the phone, Carmen was direct. I'm Carmen Lopez from Golden Valley Ranch. Do you know Sergio Morales? Silence on the other end. Ma'am, I need to speak with my supervisor. That's all I needed to know, thank you. She hung up. That afternoon, Sergio arrived at the main house, nervous, pale. Robert Lopez was sitting in the living room, ribs bandaged but conscious. Carmen had told him everything during the morning. Michael and Emily were present too, silent witnesses. Carmen didn't waste time. I called the agency. Tom Jensen exists. He confirmed he knows you, almost confessed about the commission before hanging up nervously. Sergio closed his eyes. Carmen, Mrs. Lopez, I'm not asking for explanations. I'm informing you of your situation. Robert spoke for the first time, voice weak but firm. 19 years you worked here. I met you when you were 26. I taught you, gave you fair wages, treated you with respect. We trusted you completely. He paused to breathe, the rib pain evident. And this is how you repay me? Sabotaging my equipment? Risking my harvest? Trying to steal $150,000 from me? Sergio breathed shakily. I needed money. My daughter's going to college. The expenses... We all have expenses, Carmen cut in. That doesn't justify betrayal. Michael intervened, voice contained but furious. You could have asked for a loan, could have asked for a salary advance. Dad's always been generous with honest employees, but you preferred to lie, sabotage, steal. Emily, the youngest, spoke with a soft but clear voice. And put everyone's jobs at risk. If we'd lost the harvest, we couldn't have paid salaries. Eduardo, Rosa, the field workers, everyone would have suffered. Sergio collapsed, literally fell to his knees. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. I was desperate. Robert raised a hand, stopping him. Sergio Morales, you're fired immediately. You have until noon tomorrow to collect your things from the workshop. After that, I don't want to see you near this ranch ever again. Robert, please. In addition, Robert continued, I'm going to call the police. Intentional sabotage is a crime. Attempted fraud, too. I'm not going to press formal charges this time, but I want it on record. If you try anything like this again, anywhere, there will be legal consequences. Carmen added, and I'm going to call the other ranches in the area, inform them of what happened. I won't recommend you, won't give references. If anyone asks about you, I'll tell the truth. Sergio sobbed openly now. Years of reputation destroyed, career finished, uncertain future. He stood up with difficulty. I understand. I'm sorry, really. He left the house without looking back. Robert breathed deeply, pain evident in every movement. "Carmen, we need a new mechanic. Fast. Harvest starts in 2 weeks." Carmen smiled slightly. "I already have someone in mind." Sarah Stone was in the workshop organizing the tools in the yellow toolbox. The afternoon sun came through the high window, illuminating dust particles suspended in the air. She heard footsteps. She turned. Carmen Lopez entered the workshop, followed by Robert. The older man walked slowly, one hand holding his bandaged ribs. "Miss Stone," Robert said. Sarah closed the toolbox, stood up. "Mr. Lopez, you should be in bed resting." Robert smiled slightly. "My wife says the same thing, but I needed to come personally." He walked until he was in front of her. "I want to offer you a job." Sarah blinked. "Excuse me?" Carmen intervened. "Head mechanic, here at Golden Valley Ranch, starting salary of $4,500 a month. Housing included, meals included, and if things work out well, a raise after harvest." Sarah looked from one to the other, processing. I don't know what to say," Robert continued. "Yesterday you did something 6 people before you couldn't do. You identified sabotage that a mechanic with 19 years of experience tried to hide. You repaired the tractor in 35 minutes, and you did it with tools your father left you." He paused. "That tells me 3 things. First, you have real talent. Second, you're honest. Third, you honor your father's legacy. Those are the 3 qualities I look for in an employee." Sarah felt emotion tightening her throat. "Mr. Lopez, I really appreciate the offer, but you're a woman," Carmen completed gently, "and you think the field workers won't respect you, that it'll be difficult." Sarah nodded slowly. "I've worked in 5 different places. Always the same story. Skepticism, mockery, men who won't take orders from a woman. Eventually I leave because—" "This is different," Robert interrupted. "Here you saved the harvest. You exposed a traitor. The workers already know what you did. Eduardo talked to everyone last night. News spread throughout the ranch." Carmen smiled. "This morning Rosa asked me if you'd be staying. She said she'd never seen anyone stand up to Sergio like that, said it was inspiring." Sarah breathed deeply. "And Eduardo?" "Eduardo will be your assistant," Robert answered. "He has talent but needs guidance. You can teach him, and he already respects you." "I saw it yesterday," Carmen added. "We need someone reliable, someone who puts truth above commission, someone who'll care for our equipment like it's their own." Robert extended his hand. "What do you say, Miss Stone? Will you accept?" Sarah looked at the extended hand. She thought about her father, about the yellow toolbox, about the words he'd repeated 1,000 times. "Machines talk, sweetheart, and honest people always find their place." Maybe she'd found hers. She shook Robert's hand firmly. "I accept." Carmen clapped softly. Robert smiled widely for the first time in days. "Welcome to Golden Valley Ranch, Sarah Stone. You start tomorrow?" And Sarah knew her life had just changed forever. If this story touched your heart like it touched ours, show some love to Underdog Mechanics. Hit subscribe, smash that like button, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Your support keeps these incredible stories coming. 1 week later, something unusual happened at Golden Valley Ranch. Rosa Hernandez, the 43-year-old cook who'd worked at the main house for 8 years, appeared at the workshop. She wore a flour-stained apron, rough hands from kneading bread, but in her eyes shone genuine curiosity. "Miss Sarah?" Sarah looked up from the engine she was adjusting. She smiled. "Mrs. Rosa, what brings you here?" Rosa twisted her hands nervously. "I saw what you did with the tractor. How you identified the problem, how you fixed it, and I thought—" She paused as if doubting her own words. Could you teach me?" Sarah set down the wrench, wiped her hands. "Teach you mechanics?" "Yes." Rosa spoke faster. "I've spent my whole life in kitchens. It's good work, but I always wondered how machines worked. My husband was a mechanic before he died. I used to watch him work, never dared to ask. Sarah remembered when she was 8 years old, when her father first let her watch, when he patiently explained each piece, each function. All right. Come after lunch. 1 hour a day. I'll teach you the basics. Rosa smiled broadly. Thank you. Thank you so much. That first hour became 2, then 3. Rosa absorbed knowledge like a dry sponge. Sarah discovered she had natural talent, steady hands, patience, attention to detail. Eduardo watched, fascinated, as Sarah taught, explained without condescension, corrected without humiliating, encouraged without false expectations. A method Sergio had never used. 2 weeks later, harvest began. 3 international harvester tractors roaring in the fields, combines gathering golden wheat under the Kansas sun. All equipment functioning perfectly. Sarah personally supervised each machine, checked oil pressure, listened to engines, detected problems before they became failures. And when one of the tractors began to cough slightly, Rosa was the first to notice. "Miss Sarah, Tractor 3, listen to it." Sarah approached, listened, smiled. "Good ear. Air filter needs cleaning. Eduardo, bring me the kit." Together the 3 worked. Sarah directing, Eduardo executing, Rosa observing and learning. 30 minutes later, the tractor roared clean again. Carmen watched from the house, coffee in hand, Robert beside her, ribs finally healing. "You did well," Robert said. "Hiring her was the best decision." Carmen nodded. "Not just for the tractor. Look at Rosa, look at Eduardo. They're learning, growing." Michael rode past on his horse, supervising the harvest. He stopped beside his parents. "We're 3 days ahead of schedule." Sarah optimized the tractor routes. Less fuel waste, less downtime. Emily came running from the field, radiant smile. "Mom, the harvest is perfect. Mr. Ramirez says it's the best in 5 years." Robert breathed deeply, without pain for the first time in weeks. Thank God Carmen trusted her instinct. Carmen smiled, remembering the moment 3 weeks ago when she decided to go to town, when she hired the young homeless mechanic against all advice. "Sometimes," she murmured, "the best decisions are the ones others say you shouldn't make." And she watched as Sarah taught Rosa how to adjust a carburetor, patient, precise, generous with her knowledge, exactly as her father had taught her. 6 months later, the workshop at Golden Valley Ranch had changed completely. Tools organized by size on new boards, clean floor, windows letting in abundant light. And on the back wall, hung with pride, a framed photograph, James Stone, mechanic, father, teacher. Below the photo, the yellow toolbox rested open on a work table, the same tools he'd used for 30 years, now in his daughter's hands. Sarah Stone was leaning over a combine engine, explaining the hydraulic system to Rosa. The former cook no longer wore an apron. Now she wore blue coveralls, hands stained with grease, satisfaction smile on her face. "When pressure drops here," Sarah pointed, "the cylinder doesn't respond correctly. That's why we check the pump first, then the hoses." Rosa nodded, taking notes in an oil-stained notebook. "And how do I know when the pump's failing?" "Listen." Sarah turned on the system. "Hear that whine? That's not normal. A healthy pump is quiet, smooth." Eduardo appeared from under the tractor he was repairing. "Sarah, I finished the oil change. Can you check before I take it to the field?" "Right away." She turned to Rosa. "Practice identifying correct pressure. I'll be back in 10 minutes. While Sarah checked Eduardo's work, Carmen entered the workshop with a tray of cold lemonade. "Mandatory break," she announced, smiling. The 3 mechanics wiped their hands, accepted the glasses gratefully. "How's everything going?" Carmen asked. "Tractor 3 is ready for tomorrow," Eduardo answered. "Number 2 needs a minor adjustment, and we're ahead with preventive maintenance on the whole fleet." Carmen looked at Rosa. "And you? How do you feel with your new trade?" Rosa smiled widely. I never imagined at 43 I'd learn something completely new. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life in the kitchen. Not that cooking is bad, but you wanted more? Sarah completed gently. Yes, I wanted to know how things worked, wanted to feel useful in a different way. And you, she pointed at Sarah, gave me that opportunity. Sarah shook her head. I just opened the door. You walked through it. That takes courage. Carmen placed a hand on Rosa's shoulder. Next month we're hiring an additional kitchen helper. Rosa will work part-time here, part-time there, until she decides definitively where she wants to be. Rosa's eyes shone with tears of gratitude. Eduardo raised his glass. To Sarah, who taught us that talent has no gender, just requires dedication. They toasted, drank, laughed, then returned to work. Sarah stayed a moment longer, looking at her father's photograph. She touched the yellow toolbox with reverence. I did it, Dad. I found my place, and I'm helping others find theirs. She thought about Sergio, expelled, disgraced, consequence of his own decisions. No false compassion, but no celebrating his fall either. She thought about Robert and Carmen, who trusted when others doubted, who chose competence over prejudice. She thought about Rosa, who at 43 had the courage to start over. And she thought about all the women who would come after, who would see this story, who would wonder if they could too. The answer was simple. Yes, they can. They just need the right tools, a fair opportunity, and the courage not to give up when the world says they don't belong. Sarah gently closed the yellow toolbox, smiled, and returned to the waiting engine. Because machines don't understand doubts or fears, only hands that know how to listen and hearts that dare. Thank you so much for watching this incredible story here at Underrated Mechanics. If you enjoyed Sarah's journey from homeless to head mechanic, please subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss our inspiring stories. Drop a like if this moved you and comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love connecting with viewers from all around the world. See you in the next video.